We choose Number Talks in our classroom because it allows for multiple access points for all learners. And it's differentiated in a way that's subtle, that the kids aren't realizing that it is differentiated. In my past math practice, I have used many different strategies in teaching math, including something like math stations, where I have different leveled learners in mathematics, and I'm catering to that group based on what their needs and their abilities are. And with that, I noticed that it creates a hierarchy in the classroom where it tended, in my experience, to shut down the more emergent learners as mathematicians, and noticing that the other groups are doing something more complicated, that they're not capable mathematicians because of that. And so this year, it was such a wonderful opportunity to now have Number Talks as a whole class community where, yes, we are differentiating, but they're not aware of it. And so for Number Talks, that's something that I have found such value in establishing and facilitating and fostering a classroom community where everybody's voice is important and valued, and they're not aware that it is a differentiated approach. With Number Talks, we used it right from the beginning of our classroom year. It gives you an opportunity when we have these turn and shares to answer these questions to really dive deep in these conversations with the kids, to actually assess them and see where they're at without any paperwork or anything that's one-on-one. I'm sitting down with them at the carpet and just hearing them talk and taking notes in September of what I'm noticing, what their abilities are, what they know already, and where the gaps are. So I started with Number Talks in September with basic things like subitizing or ordering numbers from 1 to 10 and just seeing what their thoughts are on that. And then moving from there to do a next step and figure out what is missing in this group and where we can go to next. Introducing mathematical vocabulary in this class for Number Talks was actually quite tricky for me. I'm so used to introducing a concept, and that's for all the learners to understand, and it's coming from me, and it's very teacher-directed. With this, it's kind of flipped on its head, where the learning is actually coming from the children as mathematicians. And so for mathematical vocabulary, I hear their ideas and their strategies, and then I might offer a term for it, a name for it, and then beside it put, so Farah, you're giving us a strategy where you're counting up by ones. So counting by ones is the title I would give that strategy, but then we would also add Farah's strategy on the bottom so we can refer to it as either one so that they have that ownership as well. So it's been a huge learning curve for me to hear and just listen and see what I can pull from that. And it might even be me listening and reflecting overnight to hear what I did in that previous Number Talk, and then be more prepared for the next day of, do you remember when Farah was talking about counting by ones, or when Jason decided to switch a number over so that it's friendlier, and then actually entitling it as compensation as the math term so they have that language. And it's appropriate, and it's something that will make sense in their years to come. I think it's really important to provide them with the appropriate vocabulary so that when they do move on to the next grade or later in their years, that they have the appropriate term that the teachers and other learners would understand, and that it's consistent. In this classroom this year, I am most proud of the ability to really celebrate every learner in this classroom as a mathematician, and carefully selecting in the beginning and each Number Talk, that selecting from their more emergent learners and their strategies, and celebrating those strategies because they are trying, and making a big deal of that, and not weighing one more than the other, because as soon as they see that someone else has an idea and I continue to just choose the more proficient mathematician, in my experience, it has shut them down as learners and contributors. And in this class, in this format, they really do see themselves as teacher, and we have allowed that by putting their names on the board, putting their names on strategies, and offering that to teach the rest of the children. And I have never seen such engagement from the entire class, truly, in this format of Number Talks than any other strategy that I have done. They truly see themselves as teachers, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've seen in my teaching practice. I am very proud of that. truly. There have been some challenging moments in my journey this year, just with regards to bordering that line of what is efficient and like really encouraging what's efficient as a mathematician, but still staying in their zone. Each child has their own zone of proximal development, but staying within that zone. It's still celebrating what is efficient. Oh my gosh, it's more efficient to take a leap of 10 than to count by ones. Because I've found that I really just want it, my number one goal is to hear from what are your strategies, what are you doing, what's happening, what's working, what's not. But then also kind of navigating that line of, okay, well, how can we push your thinking forward without shutting down your thinking? And so that's been tricky. It's come a long way and it's so beautiful, but sometimes taking that step back to, ooh, that might have been too much to shut that child's thinking down of like, oh, so it's better to take a leap of 10. And so just really unpacking what that word means. And now it's become their language of when we do a reflection, for example, for something for fresh grade, where they're maybe they're totaling up a certain number of items and saying, well, I counted by ones, but I do think it might be more efficient if I were to count by twos or fives, but I'm not there yet. And so even that language has come up. So yes, it's challenging, but it's also a beautiful way for them to reflect and understand that everyone's on a different path as learners and there's no right or wrong way, and it's whatever works for you. So today, I purposefully chose a number talk that I was hoping that they would acknowledge that there's a leap of 10 is the big theme that I was hoping to get from them. And these numbers are carefully selected, so starting with 38 plus 10, to hopefully encourage, oh, leaps of 10 could be a really great strategy. So again, it's just kind of hidden in there that hopefully it'll guide them towards that strategy. And again, selecting Lily, and that's where I was conversing with each child, and I heard her counting by ones, and I wanted to highlight that as maybe one of the pins in our strategy of a more emergent thinker, and celebrating that with anyone else that had that as a strategy. But then where can you go next from that strategy, which is where I heard Aurora talking about taking a leap of 10 was really, really efficient for her. Where to next? There was a lot of talk, and I talked with a couple of groups that were talking about, whoa, so we're going 38 plus 12. I'm taking a leap of 10, or maybe I could stack them. And a lot of the kiddos at home have been taught to stack the numbers, but we haven't talked about what it means to carry a 1 over. And so I talked with one group that were talking about that, and they just weren't sure what to do with that 1 in their brains of where that 1 is going. And so they shifted their thinking into actually taking another leap of 10 instead for mental math, that it was a lot easier for them or more efficient to take that leap of 10 and 2 more to get to their answer. What's next is I think I want to unpack more place value with them. And so if we were to take that strategy of aligning them up and stacking those numbers on top of each other, what happens? Is there a ones column? Is there a tens column? And why? And what do you do next with that information? So I think that's where I would go to next in the number talk that we would do. Number talks complement our classroom in such a beautiful way because our number one goal is for them to see themselves as capable teachers, learners, writers, mathematicians, researchers. And so the fact that they are all, again, seeing themselves as co-teachers complements beautifully. We have them in our writers circle, sharing their writing and what's working in their writing and what's not. As scientists, having discoveries. What did I discover at this provocation or outside at the garden? We're all coming together throughout our entire day, and this complements and just goes alongside so much, so beautifully with things we're already doing. Number one, for me, this is the first year I've done number talks. I have found immense value in doing this alongside another teacher and having very frequent check-ins. So if you could even do a similar number talk with another teacher, even if they're in another age group, I find so much value in what's working and what's not, because a lot of it is not even about the math that's happening, it's about the conversations and how to pull and where to go next. and I have had such value where I'm feeling unsure about something and I have that reflection, and sometimes it's just saying it out loud for yourself to reflect is what you need, and having a colleague, an educator, or somebody to reflect with has been huge for me. So if you were to start this on your own, I would highly recommend doing it with somebody. It's just nice to have that space, that safe space to converse with each other and figure out what's going well, what's not. And then with that being said, I would also say start small and do not have expectations, and have one goal, maybe have one idea or perspective that you would like to take in your number talk, and just listen. I think, again, I was very overwhelmed going into it because of these math terms that I'm not familiar with. I'm just used to explaining a math term and explaining how that strategy works and go try. And with this, it's pulling from them. And so give yourself time to reflect, even if it's overnight, and then come back the next day to reflect on that whole lesson and unpack it with them. So I would just say slow down, have a colleague or someone to reflect with, and you're gonna do great.